is to make sure we can do a single transformation rule from our preimage to our image. What that means is that we're going to take all three of these rules and create a new mapping rule. So the way I generally do this is I start with my x and y, because that's from my preimage. Then we change it from our rules up top. The first rule, the blue rule, was we actually negated both of them. So what I'm going to do is put a negative on both of these in blue. The next rule asks us to negate just the y values. So anytime, if I already have something on the letter, I have to put parentheses around it before I can do anything else. So it said negate the y, so I have my parentheses around my y because that's what I need to focus on. Then I have to put a negative on the outside of that as well. Then our last rule was to add 6 to the x and subtract 1 from the y's. Now since we're going to put it on both the letters, the x has something on it already. So I'm going to put parentheses around it, and then I'm going to put plus 6. Now on the y's, I'm actually going to put parentheses around all of that, because that's all attached to the y. Then I'm going to put minus 1 at the back. I've gone through all three of my rules, and so all I want to do now is just to simplify this to write a final rule. So I have my x, y maps to parentheses. The parentheses here, nothing is attached to the parentheses except for that plus 6, so that's fine. That means I do not have to distribute. I keep a negative x, then I just put plus 6, because this will stay as negative, because that's really a 1 times a negative x. So I have negative x, and then plus 6, comma. Now, parentheses, and I have parentheses inside of it. So I have this negative attached to this parentheses, so I need to distribute to this y, to the negative y, becomes a positive y. And then this minus 1 is on the outside. So I really have a positive y minus 1. And now what I want to do is to check to see if this rule works. If I take my preimage, I should be able to plug in my x and my y and get out my final image coordinate. So I've plugged in 0 for the x. Negative 0 plus 6 is 6. I have 6 right here for the x. And then 0 for the y, I have y minus 1. So the 0 minus 1 is negative 1. And that's what we have. Do the same thing for b. 8. Negative 8 plus 6 is a negative 2. And that's what we have here. Plug in the 1. 1 minus 1 is 0, which is what we have. So far, so good. Then c. Plug in 5. Negative 5 plus 6 is a positive 1. Positive 1. Plug in the y. 5 minus 1 is 4, and that's what we have, 4. That means that this rule is a composite rule for all of these. So if I were just given this rule, this rule right here, I could have done from the pre-image all the way to our final image without having to do the blue and the green. The reason we want to do that, to know that, is so that we can actually check to make sure that that worked. That's how you write a single transformation rule from the pre-image to the final image. Rule, we start with our x and y. We start over here, x and y, and a little comma. First rule says we're going to add 1 to the x's, and we're going to subtract 6 from the y's. So I did that in blue. In green, I'm going to only affect the y's. Now since I have stuff in the y's, I need to put parentheses around everything in my y first, and then I can change my sign on my y's. Then the third part says we want to flip them. So I'm going to go ahead and show that this is going to flip. So I'm going to take all of this and flip it. So I'm going to rewrite this. I'll rewrite it in pencil for right now. Just everything that I have. I have negative parentheses y minus 6 close parentheses, comma, x plus 1. And then what we want to do to it is negate both of our signs. Now I have to put parentheses around everything in this location before I put my negative. I put everything in parentheses on that location before I put my negative. Now we just simplify it. So we have, from the outside, on this first part, we have negative times a negative, which is a positive, times a y minus 6. So it's just a positive times y minus 6, which is a y minus 6, comma. Now we have a negative times an x plus 1. So negative times x and 1 is a negative x and then a negative 1. That's our final rule. We can check this by plugging in our values from our preimage. Now this one said to plug in this y value of our preimage, which is 6. 6 minus 6 is 0, which is actually what we get for our x value, because this is in the first location. This is actually the location of our image coordinate. Not necessarily the value, but the location of our image coordinate. And then for the location of our y value, we plug in the original x value. So negative times negative 12 is positive 12, minus 1 is a positive 11. So that works. So again, we put in our preimage x to the x and the y to the y. And we got out the location of our image coordinates. Location of our image coordinates. So the front and the back. We could do that on all of them. Now for our rule that we want to do, we're going to start with our x and our y. The first thing we want to do is to negate both the x and the y. So I'm going to put a negative blue on our x and my y. Since I didn't have anything around my x originally, I don't have to put parentheses yet. Now for the green, I did want to add 2 and add 2. Now that I have something on my x, I have to put parentheses. And then I can put plus 2. Since I have something on my y, I need to put parentheses, and then I can add 2. For the last one on the red, I wanted to actually do half of all of it. So since I take the entire thing here, and I have to put parentheses around the entire thing, I just multiply it by 1/2. For the y's, I put parentheses around the entire thing in the y area, and I put 1/2. So now we actually have to multiply out. So we have x, y maps to. I have 1/2 times negative x and to a positive 2 because of those parentheses. So 1/2 times negative x is a negative 1/2 x. And then 1/2 times a positive 2 is a positive 1, comma. I do the same thing with the 1/2 on the y. So 1/2 times that negative y is negative 1/2 y. And then 1/2 times that positive 2 is a positive 1. So plus 1. So this is actually our rule. So if we go from our preimage to our final image, so if we take negative 1/2 of x, so negative 1/2 of 2 is a negative 1. Then we're going to add 1 to that, which gives us negative 1 plus 1 is 0. And this gives us our location, so it's going to be in the front of our x, so this is going to be our x coordinate. We can do the same thing with our y, so negative 1/2 times the 2 is again negative 1, plus 1 is 0. So this gives us our location on our h triple prime, which was 0 here as well. So that is the correct rule.